got a signing to report on today's show as the Falcons have finally answered our calls. They have went out and signed a defensive end. Not a household name, but we'll break it down on today's show and run through what this means for the upcoming NFL draft. But we are closing in on 21,000 subscribers, so if you're looking for an Atlanta Falcons YouTube channel that's going to report on every single signing Atlanta makes, go ahead and hit that sub button down below. But let's get you guys familiar with James Smith-Williams, defensive end for the Falcons. His agent, Mike McCartney, who's also Kirk Cousins' agent, so clearly he has some good relationships with the folks in Flowery Branch, tweeted out the news. And I always hate when agents tweet out the news because I don't follow the agents on Twitter, and I feel like it gets missed a little bit. But let's break down the signing as the 2027th round pick out of NC State has been with the Washington Commanders for the first 4 years of his NFL career. He's got 55 career games played under his belt and 27 starts. So very impressive for a 7th-round pick to have that much experience 4 years into his NFL career. Now, I'm not going to stand here and act like he is some world-renowned edge rusher. Last year, he made 7 starts for the Commies, 22 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 1 sack. He had a lot of runway towards the end of the season when he began starting for Washington. Also helped that Chase Young and Montez Sweat were traded away, but he did suffer an injury, which I felt like got in the way of him really ramping up. There was a lot of good film from the end of last season from James Smith-Williams. When you look at his career stats, he's never been a dominant pass rusher. Career high 3 sacks in a single season back in 2022. So I wouldn't look at this signing and go like, all right, Atlanta is ready to roll at pass rusher now. No, I think this is just a good depth piece and another man to join the rotation. Now, I know you're all wondering, what's his Madden rating? Well, it is 70 overall, so by no means do I think we should feel satisfied with a 70 overall defensive end signing. I'm not going to be very opinionated or passionate about this signing because I think it's a depth signing, but I do think for the time being, he is this team's starting defensive end, and we'll break it down later. But have you ever heard of James Smith-Williams before? Because I certainly haven't. I'm not going to stand here and act like I watched a lot of Commanders tape from the end of last year when he really started to get some starts going. But be honest with me, have you ever heard of this guy before? Now, I think he actually walks in and it becomes the team's starting defensive end ahead of Zach Harrison because he does have all that experience. But this is definitely one of the top training camp battles to watch for. I'm sure after the draft, there'll be more players added to this position group. But for now, I do think it is James Smith-Williams starting next to David Onyemata and Grady Jarrett. If everyone was healthy and the Falcons had a game tomorrow, he'd be out there with the first-team defense, okay? But I think Zach Harrison is going to be a deep part of that rotation. And after training camp, who knows? He may win that battle and get the starting gig for NFL Week 1. But when you look at their front 5, I think this is a nice start, like I've been saying, for Atlanta to try and beef up their pass rush. But I want to see more, right? Kylo Ren, more. Do not stop. Bring on more pass rushers. So I don't think this should change the draft strategy at all. I don't think signing James Smith-Williams should make Atlanta feel a lot more comfortable about maybe we don't go pass rusher early in the draft. No, you probably should still. When you look at the Atlanta Falcons 2024 draft picks, they've got a lot of picks in the top 100, right? A first, a second, and 2/3. Now, this is not a very deep pass rusher class, and all things considered, it's not that great of a pass rusher class. None of these guys I really look at and think, we've got some all-pro caliber players. We've got some Von Millers in this draft. Like, one, I probably shouldn't have said Millers. You only get one Von Miller maybe every other draft or so. But there's not that guy in this year's draft in my eyes. But there are some good pass rushers, like Dallas Turner, one of the most freakiest athletes we've seen at that position group come out in a few years. Really good production for Alabama last year. Jared Verse, one of the more well-rounded guys. He can stop the run very well. He can anchor himself, but he also has back-to-back 9-sack seasons. And then the ace of spades in all this, Laiatu Latu, he's got 13 sacks, 21.5 tackles for loss. Extremely productive player the last 2 years. But can that translate to the NFL? That we have to wait and see. Now, before we get on to the rest of the draft conversation, following the James Smith-Williams signing, let me tell you all about our sponsor for 60 seconds, Prize Picks. That is daily fantasy made easy. Now, what does that mean? Well, all you got to do at Prize Picks is select 2 to 6 players and then choose more or less on their projected stats. Now, the more players you select, the more difficult it is, but if you go 5 for 5, 6 for 6, you're going to have a big reward waiting for you and tons of winnings. Whereas you can go 2 for 2, play it safe, go for the infield single maybe, but it's not going to be as lucrative of a payout. So however you like to live your life, go test it out at Prize Picks. So let me give you the selections that I am rolling with for this evening's slate of games. I took all the goblins. Prize Picks has demons and goblins. Demons are harder to get to stat projection-wise, but better payout, whereas goblins are easier to get to, not as lucrative of a payout, but stack 3 goblins next to each other, and I like my chances. So I'm taking the more on Luka Doncic, I'm taking the more on Nikola Jokic, and I'm taking the more on Darius Garland. So if you want to ride with me, go ahead and download the Prize Picks app and use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Once again, use code CLNS for a first-time deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. Now, I want to discuss the edge rusher group in round 2 because we've spent so much time discussing the top 3 guys for the 8th overall pick. What if Atlanta throws a curveball at us and they go wide receiver, or they go Terrion Arnold, who they had in for a visit, right? This is the draft. Be a good Boy Scout and be prepared. And let's have a good strategy for if you don't go edge rusher at pick 8, what's the plan at pick 43? Because these are the top 3 edge rushers I think are going to be in the neighborhood of pick 43. And to be honest with you, I don't love any of them at pick 43. I think Isaac and Braswell are more round 3 guys than second round guys. I think for a value-wise perspective, it's not a good selection. But the name that keeps popping up is Chop Robinson. And there's a good chance he may not even be available at pick 43. Some think he could go round 1. Some think he could be the second pass rusher taken after Dallas Turner. Now, let's get to know Chop Robinson, the guy who had 4 sacks last year for the Nittany Lions. He's 6'3", 254 pounds, and he ran a 4.48 40-yard dash. So from a physical makeup standpoint, very similar to Dallas Turner, right? Dallas Turner's slightly faster, but by a 1/10 of a second, or a 100th of a second, I think, actually. He ran a 4.47, so someone smarter tell me what the difference is. But incredible athlete, no denying that. And we know GMs and coaches, they fall in love with great athletes because you can't teach speed. But he's still a little green. And I mean, he doesn't have a great, arsenal. All the cliches. He doesn't have a bag full of awesome clubs he can use in his pass rushing mix. He just wins with his athleticism. And in the NFL, we often see that there's always great track athletes that just don't pan out in football because you don't play football at the NFL Combine, right? You play with pads on. And I'm not sold on Chop Robinson being a guy that can be more than just a freak athlete. Here's what Field Yates, by the way, recently wrote on Chop Robinson. I thought this might be interesting. The edge class seems to elicit varying opinions from around the league. Alabama's Dallas Turner is a popular fit to the Atlanta Falcons at number 8, but it's hard to figure out how the run at position will look after that. UCLA's Latu and Florida State's Jared Verse have certainly had momentum since the start of last season, but Penn State's Chop Robinson feels like a wild card in it all. He's number 18 on my board, and I believe he has a real chance to be the second edge rusher taken based on conversations with multiple people around the scouting community. So if Field Yates thinks he could be the second guy taken, shouldn't this be an absolute slam dunk of a possible pick at 43 if they don't go edge? And partially, I want to agree with you because from a value perspective, if you keep seeing a guy go in round 1 and you get him at 43, you're going to feel a lot better about that pick than going with the guy that you never saw go round 2 in mock drafts. But I go back to, what's my rule? I need production from my pass rushers in college football. If you don't produce in college football at that spot, I don't think it's going to translate very well over to the NFL. So we go back to a graphic we've shared before on the show where I looked at all the first-round picks from 2017 to 2020. 4-year span, good sample size. And in that span, 19 edge rushers were selected. Of the 19, 11 had their fifth-year option picked up or made a Pro Bowl. So I will deem 11 out of those 19 picks to be successful, meaning if the team could go back and do it again, they likely would. Now, of those 11 successful picks, 0 had less than 5.5 sacks in a single season in college football. Chop Robinson just had 4. 0 had a less than 11.5 career sacks in college football. So just going off of what history tells me, you don't find successful edge rushers in round 1 of the draft. And sure, we're talking round 2 here, so we have to find a way to blur the lines a little bit. But I'm just inclined to believe that it might look good because Mel Kiper had him going at pick 24 to the Bucs or something. But I'd rather go get a player I think is going to make a really big impact on this team. And Chop Robinson may be an awesome athlete, but I'm just not sold on that translating well to the NFL where everyone's an awesome athlete. And if you couldn't take down quarterbacks in the Big Ten, what makes you think you're going to find out how to do that in the NFL? So maybe the Falcons will sell themselves on the athletic traits and whatnot. If they don't go edge around 1 and he's there at round 2, that could be a pick where I could be proven wrong. And listen, at pick 43, it's hard to get really up in arms about a selection because you are so far from the first overall pick where it becomes more and more of a crapshoot after every single pick, essentially. So I don't want to see them just go at pick 8 purely because a guy was super fast and strong. Like Dallas Turner's like that, but he's got 10 sacks, so the production matches. Chop Robinson, I'm just not super high on. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Latest signing, James Smith-Williams joining the Atlanta Falcons defensive line. For now, I think he would start ahead of Zach Harrison, third-round pick last year, but this is definitely a training camp battle to watch for. So with that all being said, who is your dream pick at 8 and 43? Let's wrap up the show by having you guys play, the GM role for a moment. If you were calling the shots, what would you do at 8 and 43 within reason? Because you're not getting like Caleb Williams at pick number 8 so he can sit behind Kirk Cousins for a seat. I'm not even going down that train of thought. For me, I would go Malik Neighbors at pick number 8. I think he's going to be a superstar wide receiver. And I do like Rome Odunze a lot, and maybe even a little bit more than Neighbors. But I think Neighbors and Drake London would bring, a good contrast to the wide receiver room. So I would go Malik Neighbors at pick number 8. And then this might be a surprise for a dream, but I really like Jerzon Johnny Newton, the Illinois defensive tackle. I think he could be the next Grady Jarrett. And as Jarrett approaches 30 years old, he's already 30, and he's coming off a torn ACL, may not be a bad idea to kind of water the seeds at defensive tackle with a guy who's got extreme high pass rushing upside. And I know it's not a defensive end or an outside linebacker, but like I said earlier, I don't like any of the round 2 edge rushers. I think they're going to be much more like round 3 picks. So I'd rather go with the player I like a lot more that can still help rush the quarterback, which no one was better on the interior defensive line than Newton was the last 2 seasons in college football. All right, that will do it for us on today's show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We're going to sign off, and we'll catch up next time.